Hello, demons and dungeon delvers. My name is TBSkyne, and welcome to Diablo, a video game from 1997 into which I have sunk probably entirely too many hours because I was a kid back then and I could do that sort of thing. And just because I was a kid and I had free time. Nowadays, when I want to sink 100 hours into a video game, I have to do it for work. Oh, poor me. I have it so hard. Anyway, Diablo 1, 2, and 3 are video games that I have sunk probably a couple of thousand hours into collectively at this point. Probably more than that, frankly. And over the years of playing the sequels to this 1997 original, a nagging feeling started forming in the back of my head that something was meant. Like, there was some part of what the original was that I just felt like wasn't present in the newer games. And trying to be a relatively rational person, I told myself, yeah, old man, this is just your nostalgia talking. This is just, oh, video games were better when I was a kid because you were a kid, and therefore they were more surprising because you hadn't seen everything yet, and now they're not surprising you anymore. You're hearkening back to nostalgia days where everything was surprising, and it's like, it's just nostalgia. Shut up. It's bullshit. But that feeling, I replayed a bunch of Diablo 2 recently, and I replayed a bunch of Diablo 3 as well, because I had a hankering. I craved something that I thought I could find in those games, and it just wasn't delivering it for me. And so this thought returned to me that there's something missing. Like, there's something that this game had that the new games just do not. And that may be my nostalgia talking still. You know, it's a powerful force in the brain. But I figured, why not go and actually see and find out? Now, if you've been watching me over on my main channel, you may have seen videos rather like this before. Some time ago, over a year ago now, I think, I had a little, like, dip in content where I couldn't put out regular videos, or I was feeling down or something, and I just recorded and uploaded a bunch of Diablo gameplay footage because of that, where I talked about the series and my feelings about it. So if you watch those videos, some of the criticisms and observations I'm going to make in this series on here might come off as a little bit familiar, but still, there's this video essay about Diablo, about what the original did that the sequels stopped doing, that's been banging around in the back of my head. And in order to make that video essay, if I ever do, like, no guarantees, I will need a bunch of footage of Diablo from the early game, and indeed also, especially in fact, from the late game. And if I'm gonna be spending another couple of dozen hours playing Diablo anyway, might as well turn it into content, might I not? Anyway, this right here is how Diablo starts. There is an intro cinematic that you can watch. It's more of a tone piece. It doesn't really have anything to do specifically with the story that much. But this is how the game starts. Is you choose your character, warrior, rogue, wizard. I always play warrior because the other ones, I don't know. Because I've played warrior since I was a kid, that's why. And then you show up here. And that's it. There's no intro scroll, there's no tutorial, there's no nothing. It's just, here's the world, here's you. Start walking around, I guess. Unless, of course, you have the manual for the video game, which is this, or was, rather, this like little micro-novel of a thing, just massive, big, thick booklet with tons and tons and tons of information about how items work, how the quest system works, how to control the game, what you're supposed to do, like a little bit of a tutorial on what you're supposed to do, and then absolute crap tons of lore. Like, just a lot of stories about, like, the backstory and heaven and hell and the cosmology and the stuff that's happening in the background, none of which ever really comes up in the video game itself. Like, very little of all the lore that they pack into the booklet actually is especially relevant to what happens in the game. It's all just flavor and world building, which is something that's a little bit, in some ways, is one thing that video games have lost. Like, not just the physical manual, but the practice of stuffing the manual full of all kinds of external lore that nowadays I don't think you would, like, even League of Legends with their universe and all the stories that they publish there and, like, having a map and stuff. A lot of the stuff that games back in the 90s used to stuff into their manuals felt a lot more like the company was just like, oh yeah, writers, you can just write some shit and we'll put it in there, but we don't really care. Like, it wasn't part of an IP building exercise. It was just, here's the writers, just write something that's like relatively long and sort of world building, and we'll put it in the manual, and some players can read it because they're weird like that. We don't care. And Diablo is a little bit that kind of game, because most of the developer interviews you can find about the original Diablo nowadays focus very much on the gameplay aspect of the game, which was certainly also the thing that became important. Like, the whole Diablo is essentially well, not the inventor, but one of the great progenitors of the genre that today we would recognize as the looter shooter. So your Destinies, your Anthems, even your Borderlands take a lot of their core gameplay design loop from Diablo 1. And it was essentially a game that really codified the highly addictive gameplay loop of, like, go to dungeon, click on things drop stuff, that stuff has numbers on it, those numbers go up, you get more powerful as you acquire more good stuff, and you get this randomized loop drop cycle with randomized dungeons and randomized enemies, and sometimes there's special enemies that have higher loot drop chances. Like, all that stuff. It's like Diablo wasn't the first game to do it, but it was one of the first really big popular games to really, like, solidify that as a core gameplay mechanic. And so games like Destiny owe it a great depth of gratitude. And Diablo 2 and 3 honed that to perfection. Like, they really focused in on that core gameplay loop and just, like, drilled it down so that it works 110% of the time. And that's why in Diablo 2 or 3, the end game of those games, like the long term, if you play those games for hundreds of hours, is like just that. More of that, like more clicking, more finding better gear, more defeating more powerful enemies, like more, like this constant escalation of numbers, wherein, like, in Diablo 3, like, people do millions and millions of points of damage with their spells and abilities, like, with a single click, because they have, like, these ridiculously massively powerful items. Diablo 1 is a somewhat different beast, because my sword does 2 to 6 damage. My buckler has 3 points of armor. My club can do 1 to 6 points of damage. So why do I have a club? Well, because the club is more effective against undead enemies. It hits them a little bit harder. It's a game that sort of exists before the power creep sets into the series in general. And that's maybe one of the things that's worth thinking about when it comes to Diablo, like the stuff that was left behind when Blizzard started razor focusing in on only the gameplay. There's some aspects of the game feeling that was lost. But anyway, you start Diablo here. You don't know what the hell you're supposed to do, but most sensible people will probably go down here, follow the road, and like, oh no, wait, hang on. There's a dude over there. Let's talk to him. Farnham the Drunk.
Can't a fellow drink in peace?
Huh. I can say goodbye or I can talk. Okay, well, I guess we can gossip.
If I was you, and I ain't, but if I was, I'd sell all that stuff you got and get out of here. That boy out there, he's always got something good, but you gotta give him some gold, or he won't even show you what it's got.
So gossip is a random, like, every time you enter town, whether it's from loading or from going into the dungeon and coming back, gossip generates a random voice line, a random little conversation piece that you can get to listen to. And in order to hear all the voice lines, in order to hear everything that the villagers have to say, you just have to do it over and over again. You get lots and lots of repetition. So it's one of those things where you're sort of encouraged, if you are a lore person, as I am, to talk to the townsfolk over and over and over again, because each of them will...
my friend. Stay a while and listen.
Will occasionally, that was the little meme line that Kane has, will occasionally give some world building or character detail about their relationships to the other people in the village, or their thoughts on what's happening in the world right now.
Poor Farnham. He is a disquieting reminder of the doomed assembly that entered into the cathedral with Lazarus on that dark day. He escaped with his life, but his courage and much of his sanity were left in some dark pit. He finds comfort only at the bottom of his tankard nowadays, but there are occasional bits of truth buried within his constant ramblings.
Like that, for example, a little bit of history on who Farnham is. Part of the group that Lazarus let into the labyrinth. I wonder what that can mean. Well, I know who can tell us what that can mean. This is Ogden, the tavern owner. He's going to give us the actual intro to the game as such.
Thank goodness you returned. Much has changed since you lived here, my friend. All was peaceful until the Dark Riders came and destroyed our village. Many were cut down where they stood, and those who took up arms were slain or dragged away to become slaves, or worse. The church at the edge of town has been desecrated and is being used for dark rituals. The screams that echo in the night are inhuman, but some of our townsfolk may yet survive. Follow the path that lies between my tavern and the blacksmith's shop to find the church and save who you can. Perhaps I can tell you more if we speak again. Good luck.
That's Ogden. He only says that. At least until I've entered the dungeon and come back, that's all I'm going to get out of him. And that's our introduction to what's actually going on here. Always, thank goodness you've returned. Much has changed since you lived here, my friend. So that's our character. We're someone who has lived here before, who have recently returned from some kind of long journey and found that the village is somewhat depleted and everything has gone straight the heckity-heck to hell. And what has happened in the meantime? Well...
Whoa, what can I do for you?
Hello, Griswold.
The innkeeper has little business and no real way of turning a profit. He manages to make ends meet by providing food and lodging for those who occasionally drift through the village. But they're as likely to sneak off into the night as they are to pay him. If it weren't for the stores of grains and dried meats he kept in his cellar, why, most of us would have starved during that first year when the entire countryside was overrun by demons.
Things have been going poorly in Tristram since we've been away.
What ails you, my friend? Cain is a true friend and a wise sage. He maintains a vast library and has an innate ability to discern the true nature of many things. If you ever have any questions, he is the person to go to.
And this is the sort of thing that most of the townspeople, that's Pepin the healer, by the way, that most of the townspeople will tell you, is just these little snippets and tidbits about how they relate to each other and how they feel about one another. Here's Gillian the barmaid. She's incredibly unimportant, which makes her interesting.
I grew up with Wirt's mother, Canis. Although she was only slightly hurt when those hideous creatures stole him, she never recovered. I think she died of a broken heart. Wirt has become a mean-spirited youngster, looking only to profit from the sweat of others. I know that he suffered and has seen horrors that I cannot even imagine. But some of that darkness hangs over him still.
Wirt, huh? Whomst might that be? If you're a Diablo fan, but you've never played the original Diablo, but then you might know the name Wirt, and you might know about a certain peg leg, but you might not know about the character. Well, he's hanging out all the way out here on the other side of the little river, or stream, or whatever, under this tree.
Psst, over here.
I have something for sale, but it'll cost you 50 gold just to take a look at it. This is the gambling mechanic. Like, he has some random magic item. You pay 50 gold to see it, and then it's usually costs like 6,000 gold or something, and it has some special stats. But that's one way to, like, dump a bunch of gold in the late game when you have too much gold and nothing to use it on, is you can go to Wirt and you can just gamble to see if you can get some decent items out of him.
I guess I owe the blacksmith my life. What there is of it. Sure, Griswold offered me an apprenticeship at the smithy. He's a nice enough guy, but I'll never get enough money to... Well, let's just say that I have definite plans that require a large amount of gold.
Hence why he's out here hawking wares, and why he's so, So Wirt was taken by the demons into the labyrinth when he was somewhat younger. Griswold, who was part of a group that ventured into the labyrinth to try and save the townspeople, found him, saved him, even if he couldn't save his leg. And now, as you can perhaps tell from the few voice lines we've had, Griswold feels a little bit of a fatherly responsibility for the boy, but Wirt is intent on getting the hell out of Tristram, and for that he needs money. Lots of money. Because he wants to get away from here, obviously. Away from the trauma, away from the memory of his dead mother, away from the labyrinth where he was tortured. So yeah, it's a dark game, Diablo.
I sense a soul in search of answers. There is much about the future we cannot see, but when it comes, it will be the children who wield it. The boy Wirt has a blackness upon his soul, but he poses no threat to the town or its people. His secretive dealings with the urchins and unspoken guilds of nearby towns gain him access to many devices that cannot be easily found in Tristram. While his methods may be reproachful, Wirt can provide assistance for your battle against the encroaching darkness.
That's Adria. She always talks like that. She has a delivery where she emphasizes words in a strange way, which is very funny. If you have played Diablo 3, you might think you know something about Adria, and you kind of do, except at this point, the things you know about Adria from Diablo 3 are not canon. They're retcons that were added later. So one thing to notice about Tristram itself is that there's an interesting contradiction happening here. There are shadows on the ground, very clear, very obvious shadows, so there must be light coming from the sky, but whatever light is coming from the sky can't be that powerful because the light from inside every house and shack leaks out and lights up the world much more than the light in the sky. I think it's probably supposed to be moonlight, but what it does for the color scheme of Tristram is the interesting thing. Because if you take a look at the environment out here, what's the color temperature that you're looking at? Like, what kind of temperature does everything look like it is? It looks all like the tree trunks look blue, like even the grass looks kind of teal, the dirt looks almost purplish. The rocks are a deep shade of blue. Everything feels a little bit cold, clammy, just a little bit dour, a little bit like not like a pleasant environment. It doesn't really feel like somewhere where you'd want to lie down on the ground or sit in the grass and enjoy the sounds of nature or something like that. And so the only respite from all this cold clamminess, all these like very, very cold colors, is the warmth that spills out of the houses where the townspeople themselves live. And they stand in those doorways most of the time, sort of projecting an air of welcome in that sense, like showing off this safety and warmth and companionship inside. But out here, it's all kind of cold and clammy and unpleasant. And that's an atmosphere that is heightened substantially by the music. So that's the Tristram town theme, which, yeah, it has a mood, doesn't it? It really, really does. And it's not a pleasant or happy one. It's not like a perilous one either. It's not one that says you're about to be murdered, but it's one that says you're gonna die very unhappy. And the reason for all that unhappiness is here, the church, which, yeah, in case you can't tell from the light spilling out of it, is a little bit, just a tiny bit, very haunted. It is essentially blood spilling out of the church, as though there's some kind of great wound in there, or the very light of hell coming out at us. Speaking of which, this guy, he seems to be fine. Let's hear him out.
Please, listen to me. The Archbishop Lazarus, he led us down here to find the lost prince. The bastard led us into a trap. Now everyone is dead, killed by a demon he called the Butcher. Avenge us! Find this butcher and slay him, so that our souls may finally rest.
And he's dead. Now, we're just gonna go into the labyrinth just for a second.
The sanctity of this place has been fouled.
And then we're gonna walk back out. And the reason we're gonna walk back out is because we want Ogden to talk to us. Or rather, I want Ogden to talk to us. It doesn't provide us any tangible benefit from a gameplay perspective, in case you're wondering, but I want Ogden to talk to us because I want to demonstrate something else here.
Good day. How may I serve you?
Now that we have a quest, the quest to kill the butcher, we can ask the townspeople about it.
When Farnham said something about a butcher killing people, I immediately discounted it. But since you brought it up, maybe it is true.
So Gillian, the barmaid, works at the tavern with Ogden. She's taking care of her old sickly grandmother, and that's why they can't flee the town, because her grandmother wouldn't survive the journey. She has absolutely, practically nothing interesting to say about anything that happens in the labyrinth, because she's a barmaid. She doesn't know anything about demons or hellspawn, or so she doesn't provide any useful gameplay information. She's only there for flavor. She's only there to say stuff that relates to the people of Tristram and how they feel about each other and how they relate to one another.
Over here.
Anyway, Wirt, do you know something about the butcher?
I know more than you think about that grisly fiend. His little friends got a hold of me and managed to get my leg before Griswold pulled me out of that hole. I'll put it bluntly. Kill him before he kills you and adds your corpse to his collection.
He knows something about the butcher.
Adria truly bothers me. Sure, Cain is creepy in what he can tell you about the past, but that witch can see into your past. She always has some way to get whatever she needs, too. Adria gets her hands on more merchandise than I've seen pass through the gates of the King's Bazaar during High Festival.
Interesting. Adria has hidden resources, does she? Mysterious witch who always gets her hand on what she wants? But yeah, every time you enter the labyrinth and come back, the voice lines randomize. And in this playthrough, we're going to attempt to listen to as many of them as humanly possible, which means spending a lot of time in town listening to people like Gillian.
How may I serve you? Farnham is a drunkard who fills his belly with ale and everyone else's ears with nonsense. I know that both Pepin and Ogden feel sympathy for him, but I get so frustrated watching him slip farther and farther into a befuddled stupor every night.
Saying things that are not consequential, but which are interesting to building a sense of this place and these people.
Greetings, good master. Welcome to the Tavern of the Rising Sun. Farnham spends far too much time here drowning his sorrows in cheap ale. I would make him leave, but he did suffer so during his time in the labyrinth. Yes, Farnham has mumbled something about a hulking brute who wielded a fierce weapon. I believe he called him a butcher.
Indeed. You know someone else who might know something about the butcher?
Well, what can I do for you? Well, I have to practically smuggle in the metals and tools I need from caravans that skirt the edges of our damned town. That witch Adria always seems to get whatever she needs. If I knew even the smallest bit about how to harness magic as she did, I could make some truly incredible things.
Ah, Griswold.
I saw what Farnham calls the butcher as it swathed a path through the bodies of my friends. He swung a cleaver as large as an axe, hewing limbs and cutting down brave men where they stood. I was separated from the fray by a host of small screeching demons, and somehow found the stairway leading out. I never saw that hideous beast again, but his blood-stained visage haunts me to this day.
And Cain.
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
Indeed.
Oh, Gillian is a fine woman, much adored for her high spirits and her quick laugh. She holds a special place in my heart. She stays on at the tavern to support her elderly grandmother who is too sick to travel. I sometimes fear for her safety, but I know that any man in the village would rather die than see her harmed. It seems that the Archbishop Lazarus goaded many of the townsmen into venturing into the labyrinth to find the king's missing son. He played upon their fears and whipped them into a frenzied mob. None of them were prepared for what lay within the cold earth. Lazarus abandoned them down there, left in the clutches of unspeakable horrors to die.
The missing prince, by the way. So let me set some of the stage for you here. We are in the kingdom of Westmarch, and the king of Westmarch is what the hell's his name? Not king. It's Leoric, King Leoric, whose name you might know if you've played Diablo 3. He had a faithful bishop called Lazarus, and he had a son called Albrecht. And Lazarus had a contract with a demon named Diablo. And because of that contract, Lazarus stole away Albrecht in the night, took him deep into the labyrinth that we're about to explore. And the king, already well corrupted by the dark influences of Diablo upon his palace and dark influence of Lazarus, went completely fucking mad and broke from a very honorable good king into a horrifying, distressing tyrant who desperately oppressed his people, just started murdering everybody, throwing people in jail until finally his knights confronted him with his injustices and slew him where he stood. He's now interred deep within the labyrinth itself. Now, it's not 100% sure that we get the quest to go and actually face him in this particular playthrough. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. But here's hoping. I've got a couple of the quests that I want to show off, though, which is a lovely thing.
Up to you in time. Our wells have become brackish and stagnant, and some of the townspeople have become ill drinking from them. Our reserves of fresh water are quickly running dry. I believe that there is a passage that leads to the springs that serve our town. Please find what has caused this calamity, or we all will surely perish.
Like, for instance, that one, the poisoned water supply quest, which is, there's a couple of sets of different quests that you can get as you enter the game, and it's randomized on each playthrough, which sets of quests that you get. I wanted the butcher quest, because to me, it's an important part of the storytelling and the world building of this particular game. But sometimes that means sacrificing some other ones, which means we might not get the Leoric quest, which sucks, because I really want to show that off to you, but, you know, that's the way it goes.
What ails you, my friend? Ogden's barmaid is a sweet girl. Her grandmother is quite ill and suffers from delusions. She claims that they are visions, but I have no proof of that one way or the other. By the light, I know of this vile demon. There were many that bore the scars of his wrath upon their bodies when the few survivors of the charge led by Lazarus crawled from the cathedral. I don't know what he used to slice open his victims, but it could not have been of this world. It left wounds festering with disease, and even I found them almost impossible to treat. Beware if you plan to battle this fiend.
Indeed. But there's one person in particular I'd like to ask about the Butcher. And this is going to be an instructive moment for how I feel about this game relative to other Diablo
and a fellow
games.
drinking geese? Why don't that old crone do something for a change? Sure, she's got stuff. Will you listen to me? She's unnatural. I ain't never seen her eat or drink, and you can't trust somebody who doesn't drink at least a little.
I also want to ask him about the poisoned water supply, because he has a good answer to that one.
You drink water?
Anyway.
Big cleaver, killing all my friends. Couldn't stop him, had to run away. Couldn't save them. Trapped in a room with so many bodies, so many friends. No!
Farnham has absolutely, much like Gillian, who only says rather inconsequential things that aren't really relevant to your gameplay, Farnham has very little useful to say ever. He just blabbers and slurs his words and says random shit and talks shit about the other townspeople. He doesn't do anything for us. He doesn't do anything for the story. He doesn't give you any quests. He doesn't give you any rewards. He just sits there, and you can talk to him if you want, but he is, from a gameplay perspective, completely useless. So is Gillian. And yet he's there. Just to be there. Just to be a person who has gone through some of the worst stuff that you could ever possibly imagine. Some of the darkest horrors of the labyrinth, some of the worst things that the minions of hell can do to people, they have done to Farnham like they've done to Wirt. Wirt and Farnham are both characters who are deeply traumatized by the evil that has descended upon the town of Tristram. And because we get to see that, we get to see how that has broken him. And what even bringing up the name of the Butcher does to him, it sends him into, essentially triggers a post-traumatic stress disorder attack in him. We get to see how fucking awful this place is. And that, combined with the color, combined with the light, combined with the music, combined everything, all of this little tiny dinky town, this town is not like a fancy, capital of some ancient fantasy kingdom like Luc de Golain is in Diablo 2, or any of the cities that you go to in Diablo 3. There's nothing big or fancy or cool or special or even that pretty about this town. It's a bunch of little farmhouses clustered around a well in the center with a haunted church and a witch on the outskirts of the village. There's nothing epic here. There's nothing grand. There's nothing, wow, heroes setting out to fight. This is a small, isolated community that has been through trauma after atrocity after atrocity over and over and over again. And the people who live here bear those scars, all of them.
I sense a soul in search of answers. The Butcher is a sadistic creature that delights in the torture and pain of others. You have seen his handiwork in the Drunkard Farnham. His destruction will do much to ensure the safety of this village.
I do love the voice actress who provides the voice for Atria, like their delivery. It's so dramatic.
The people of Tristram will die if you cannot restore fresh water to their wells. Know this, demons are at the heart of this matter, but they remain ignorant of what they have spawned.
And that's, in terms of the thing that I feel that it was eventually missing from Diablo 2 and 3, remember how we talked about power creep? I think I did. I've done a lot of takes on this video. The power creep of, like, when you get to Diablo 3, you'll be doing hundreds of thousands of points of damage because you are a half-human, half-angel, Nephilim special chosen someone who straddles the realms of, like, light and dark, and you're gonna go to heaven and also to hell and defeat all of the primevals and, like, crush the very armies of the princes of hell. You're gonna do millions of points of damage, and you're gonna, like, go to all kinds of exotic, fantastic locations all over the world, globe-trotting. Wow. This is that, except for story. Diablo is a tiny, small, intimate game. These are the only characters you're gonna meet over, like, nobody else shows up in town. There's no other NPCs for you to talk to. You will occasionally meet someone in the labyrinth who will give you a voice line or two before you try to kill each other, but that's it. These are all the people that are here. These are all the people that you get to talk to. It's small, it's intimate, and all of it begins with the abduction and murder of a child. The prince, Albrecht, of the country, whose abduction shatters his father's mind, but also precipitates the infestation of Tristram Cathedral. Because, well, I don't want to spoil it in case you don't know about it, but there is an intimate connection between Albrecht and Diablo himself. Like, Diablo is here because Albrecht is there, right? Put it that way. And you'll see as we actually get down there what exactly I mean. But this is a town, like, the entire tragedy is precipitated by that. An act of unspeakable violence by an unscrupulous bishop against an innocent child.
Greetings, good master. Welcome to the Tavern of the Rising Sun. I have always tried to keep a large supply of foodstuffs and drink in our storage cellar. But with the entire town having no source of fresh water, even our stores will soon run dry. Please, do what you can, or I don't know what we will do.
And that also reflects itself in the quests that you get. Like the Butcher, yes, it's an evil demon in the labyrinth who must be slain because he's terrifying and dangerous. But then there's the poisoned water supply. It's basically, drinking water kind of sucks. Could you do something about that? Again, it's not exactly like the epic quest that you get when you are the chosen one trying to save the world. This is, well, I mean, we're a bunch of villagers who need some water to eat, so, I don't know, could you go check out what the water supply is like?
Well, what can I do for you? Pippin has told you the truth. We will need fresh water badly, and soon. I've tried to clear one of the smaller wells, but it reeks of stagnant filth. It must be getting clogged at the source.
Again, a very pedestrian concern.
Hello, my friend. I don't know what I can really tell you about this that will be of any help. The water that fills our wells comes from an underground spring. I have heard of a tunnel that leads to a great lake. Perhaps they are one and the same. Unfortunately, I do not know what would cause our water supply to be tainted.
And we'll end up... we don't need to ask Word about it, because I think he only has, like, a single paragraph or something that doesn't really matter.
Good day.
But I'll ask Gillian
How may I
about it, just for
serve you?
flavor.
My grandmother is very weak, and Garda says that we cannot drink the water from the wells. Please, can you do something to help us?
This is what we're doing. We're saving some townswoman's grandmother. It's all very small. It's all very, not inconsequential, but these aren't world-shattering events. This is one little town being haunted by the specters that persist in the dungeon below the church and being corrupted by them. And that, I think, is also going to be where we cut this particular episode. This is the introduction to Tristram. rather than the actual gameplay. Next episode, I promise you, we'll go smack some demons in the face with some swords, but this time around, I just wanted you to introduce you to Tristram and take some time there to talk to the villagers, to kind of explain what the feeling of this place is, because this, again, is the only hub that you get, the only characters that you get to meet. A lot of the time when I played this game as a kid, I just kind of, oh yeah, Tristram, buy a thing from the blacksmith, walk into the labyrinth, and never give a damn about any of the NPCs ever, unless I knew that they had a quest for me or something. This time around, we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to take the game a little bit more seriously. Anyway, if you want to follow along with my journey through Diablo, or any of the other games I'm playing on this channel, I'm playing Hades, and people seem to enjoy that a great deal, which is also a roguelike, go figure. Like, comment, subscribe, and algorithm, bell icon, blah, blah, you know the drill, it's YouTube. I also have a Patreon and merchandise store and a tip jar. You can use them if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. Memberships are also available on this channel. There we go. I've done the self-shilling that I need to do. So, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to wash your hands and wear a mask if you're going to be around other people. And try to act in solidarity if you can with those who are trying really hard right now to make the world a better place.